It's Michelle with Ready or Not Prepares.
Greetings, family. Welcome back to Ready or Not Prepares. I am your host, Michelle. I gotta tell you, it feels good to be back in my office, in my chair, on the podcast. I took a few months off, but we're closing out 2025 with something I couldn't stay quiet about. Because ultimately, I think it's what we enter 2026 with, by God's permission. It is a global conflict snapshot where we are right now. So, first, let's situate ourselves globally. What's going on around the globe? Well, in Europe, or Eastern Europe, in Eastern Europe, we have the Russia-Ukraine war, which continues to shape global energy, grain, certain foods. In the Middle East, you have Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, Syria, Jordan, Gaza. All of these are unstable with ongoing conflicts and tensions that threaten major shipping corridors, energy, different commodities. Then we have Africa, another hotspot, multiple conflicts from Sudan to the Sahel corridor. And I'll get into that in a moment. I would really want to break that down because it has a lot to do with the U.S. strikes in Nigeria. But it's all creating displacement. It's about militarization. Now it's about foreign intervention. It's a lot. In Latin America, we have tensions between the United States and Venezuela, and it's escalating. What is that surrounding? Or what does that involve? None of these are isolated. They all overlap or interact. With that in mind, let's start with this. On Christmas Day, the United States launched military strikes in Nigeria. I think President Trump framed it as protecting Christians from ISIS terrorists. Mainstream media ran with that narrative. But if you know, you know. There's a whole lot more to the story. And when I say a whole lot more, I mean, we're talking about, as I mentioned earlier, the Sahel region, or sometimes you might hear it called the Sahel corridor. We're talking about French colonialism. We're talking about a war for resources of Africa. And we're talking about a pattern of Western intervention in Africa that goes back to centuries to colonization. So today I want to break down what really might have happened, why the Christian genocide narrative doesn't hold water, what this means global in terms of global stability, and most importantly, what this means for preparedness, especially for our community here in the United States. So let's get into it. I want to talk about what they're telling us versus what probably actually is happening. And I say that because I do a lot of research. You do know that my approach to disaster preparedness is comprehensive because I think everything is connected. So here's what mainstream media wants us to believe. That ISIS terrorists in northwest Nigeria have been slaughtering Christians. And the U.S. stepped in on Christmas Day to protect innocent Christians from religious prosecution. Now, let me give you some context that CNN and Fox News and other mainstream media conveniently left out. Let's reason together. First, Nigeria's president is Bola Tinubu. And excuse me, I probably will be mispronouncing a lot of these names. But Bola Tinubu is a Muslim. The area that was struck, I think, is Sokoto State in northwest Nigeria, which they continue to point out. That area is overwhelmingly Muslim. Nigerians' own government and security analysts have made it crystal clear. Both Christians and Muslims are victims of violence in these regions. Nigeria's foreign minister, he said, this is not a religious conflict. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The media, mainstream, keeps emphasizing northwest Nigeria. Like, that's just a geographic detail. But if you know African geography, you know that northwest Nigeria is part of the Sahel region, or sometimes you might hear it called the Sahel corridor. And I want to break down what the Sahel actually is, because this is critical. Because when I heard about this on Christmas Day, and they kept saying, protecting Christians from terrorists, and then it kept saying the northwest region, northwest Nigeria, I was like, why do they keep saying that? Why do they keep emphasizing Christian terrorists? The Sahel, so the Sahel is like, I guess a belt of like desert and savanna or grassland that stretches across Africa from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. It includes 10 countries about or more, which are Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, Guinea, the Gambia, and Cameroon. Now, here's the key. 8 of these 10 countries were colonized by France. Only 2 weren't, and that's Nigeria and the Gambia, all British colonies. Both British colonies. So when Trump and the mainstream media pushed this defending Christians narrative concerning the strikes in a Muslim majority region of a country led by a Muslim president in an area where Muslims are also being killed, you have to ask yourself, what's the real agenda? Niger borders Nigeria to the north. Benin borders Nigeria to the west. And right now, 3 countries in the Sahel corridor or the Sahel region, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have formed what they call the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES. Their leaders are Ibrahim Traore, And a lot of us have heard of Ibrahim Traore. He of Burkina Faso. Assimi Goïta of Mali. And I'm going to get these names wrong. And Aborahamani Tichiani of Niger. These young leaders kicked out France troops, rejected Western interference, and are charting their own path. And by the way, they are all Muslims. A quick story I have to interject, and that is my family and I traced our African ancestry and discovered that we are from the Mindi tribe in Sierra Leone. And I further researched and found that the Mindi tribe migrated from Mali to Sierra Leone. So it's my Mali ancestry. Back to the issue at hand. So you have to consider France. France is not too happy about losing their grip on these resource-rich territories. I remember Minister Farrakhan giving a speech just talking about how dependent France is on these these African countries. That ultimately, without these African countries, France can barely stand alone. So you can imagine. Let's get to the bigger picture. I want to connect some dots for you. The Sahel region sits on massive reserves of uranium, gold, oil, lithium, and other critical and strategic minerals. You know, lithium, that's what helps power your Teslas, iPhones, lithium batteries. Huge resource. France has maintained what many call neo-colonial control over these former colonies through currency control, military bases, and just access to these resources up until now. Because something shifted. These young African leaders said, no more, enough. They are attempting to renegotiate who benefits from these resources. They're building their own alliance, creating their own currency, establishing their own media, AES television, and they're partnering with Russia and China instead of France and the United States. Now, the U.S. has been building military infrastructure in this region for years. In 2019, the U.S. opened its largest drone base in Niger. But why? Because whoever controls the Sahel region can monitor and influence most of Africa and its resources. So when the U.S. conducts its first ever airstrike in Nigeria on Christmas Day, a country it's never directly attacked before, and frames it as defending Christians in a Muslim region, you have to pause. You just intuitively have to pause. Like, what? And also, Trump admitted that U.S. forces attacked a big facility inside Venezuela on Christmas Eve, one day before the Nigeria strikes. Now, what does Venezuela have? I'll tell you. It has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. What does Nigeria have? Nigeria has Africa's largest oil reserves and is the 6th largest oil exporter globally. See a pattern yet? Remember Iraq? What about Libya? Syria? Now Nigeria and Venezuela. These aren't random. These are resource wars. It's wrapped in a humanitarian language. You think? So I guess you say, what does this mean for preparedness? When government and media narratives don't match reality on the ground, that's your first warning. Nigerian journalists, African security analysts, and people actually living in these regions are telling a completely different story than what we're hearing on CNN. I'll say what you're hearing. What we're hearing in mainstream media. Preparedness, your preparedness also includes media literacy. You got to diversify your news sources. Seek out alternative media. Read The Final Call, which has been covering Western intervention in Africa, honestly, for decades. Trying to warn us, trying to tell us stop being distracted. Trying to get us to look at things from a global purview. Because when the narrative seems too simple or too convenient, dig deeper. Second, resource scarcity drives conflict. The violence in northwest Nigeria isn't primarily about religion, as it's being made out to be. It's about land. It's about water. It's about survival. And just in terms of the people in that area, climate change has intensified competition between farmers and herders. When resources get scarce, people fight. That's universal. Whether it's water rights, like here in America in the West, or access to food during supply chain breakdowns, resource competition creates instability. You remember when during COVID, let's not even do that. You remember Christmases ago when the supply and demand was short. If you looked on social media, what have you, people were grabbing TVs, stampedes in the stores, fights over the television, over getting the televisions. It's a lot. Resource competition creates instability, irrationality. But for us, our community, we need to understand as Black people in America that economic instability hits our communities first and hardest. We need to build our own resource independence now. Make sure you have food security, water security. Research energy alternatives. Don't wait for crisis. Be prepared for them. Third, military expansion means economic pressure. Every dollar spent on military operations in Africa, Venezuela, the Middle East, is a dollar not spent on infrastructure, healthcare, education, or community investment here at home. The military-industrial complex doesn't serve everyday people. It serves corporate interest and resource extraction. And for the Black community, Black communities are already economically marginalized. Continued military spending means continued disinvestment at home. And when economic pressure increases domestically, social tensions rise. That's why we need strong community networks and mutual aid systems, bartering, trading amongst each other. Fourth, the diaspora connection matters. I submit, for Black Americans, what happens in Africa isn't just foreign policy. There's a connection there. The Nigerian diaspora here in the United States is significant. So when the U.S. bombs Nigeria, that impacts people's families, their ability to travel safely, their sense of security. And we have to be mindful and understand there are a lot of expats now in Africa. There are a lot of Black Americans who are now moving to and living in Africa. So this means our preparedness includes maintaining strong ties, understanding that global instability affects us locally, or building solidarity across the diasporas is a really real thing now. It needs to be a goal. And fifth, pattern recognition. Please understand this. Venezuela today could be anywhere tomorrow. Nigeria today could be Ghana or Kenya next year. The pattern of intervention: demonize the leadership, claim humanitarian concern, conduct military operations, extract resources, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Understanding this pattern helps us to anticipate where instability might emerge next. It helps you think strategically about your own positioning and preparedness. And that includes here in America. I live in DC. The Sahel region, or the Sahel corridor in America for Black people looks like these urban cities with Black mayors trying to reduce crimes, and now have National Guard coming to or in all of these cities. You could be next. Remember that. So what do you actually do with this information. 1, in terms of preparedness, 1, build your own intelligence network. Subscribe to alternative news sources. Follow alternative journalists and analysts on social media. Remember, the final call has been here, has a record of integrity. In other words, you want to read beyond the spin. You want to read beyond what Western media is giving you. Your situational awareness depends on good intelligence, and good intelligence comes from multiple perspectives. 2, strengthen your economic resilience. Reduce dependence on systems that can be disrupted by global instability. Now, this means you want to build savings and emergency funds. You want to develop multiple income streams. Learn skills that have value in any economy. Invest in tangible assets you control. And support small businesses in our community, support Black-owned businesses, and cooperative economics. 3, prepare for supply chain disruptions. Global military operations, economic sanctions, and resource conflicts disrupt supply chains. We saw this with COVID. We're seeing it with conflicts in shipping lanes. Keep at least 3 to 4 weeks of food and essential supplies. In our community, I say double that. Learn preservation, gardening, and basic repair skills. And then know your local sources. 4, organize locally. Individual preparedness is good. Community preparedness is better. Build relationships with your neighbors. Join or create mutual aid networks. Support community self-defense and security initiatives. When larger systems fail, your community is your first line of defense. I am a member of CERT, the Community Emergency Responders. And I became a member, 1, because of my disaster preparedness company, but also I realized that first responders don't respond to our community first. We saw that with Katrina, Hurricane Katrina. So to make your community your first line of defense. And 5, stay politically aware, but locally focused. Understand global patterns, but focus your energy on what you can control. We can't stop U.S. military operations in Nigeria, but we can make sure our families are prepared for economic consequences. You can organize your block. You can build with your people. Look, family, the world is more connected than most people realize. I say that over and over. What happens in the Sahel region affects oil prices, which affects your gas tank, which affects your food costs, which affects your ability to prepare, which affects your ability to survive. The strikes in Nigeria aren't about protecting Christians. They're about power, resources, and maintaining Western control over Africa. The pressure on Venezuela isn't about drugs. It's about oil and geopolitical dominance. For us, as Black people, we've seen this movie before. From the transatlantic slave trade to colonialism to neo-colonialism to these modern military interventions, the script is familiar. Our ancestors survived because they prepared, they organized, and they passed down the knowledge. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I want us to build knowledge. Let's build capacity. Let's build a community. The world isn't getting more stable, but we can get more prepared. Ready or not, these systems will continue to shift and shake. So let's choose to be ready. So as we close out this episode and move into a new year, I want to say this to you sincerely. I wish you God's peace, and I wish you a safe and prepared new year. If this breakdown was helpful to you, do 3 things for me. Like this video so it reaches more people who need this type of information, this type of knowledge. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is where we break down headlines through a survival and preparedness lens. And share this episode with someone who needs context. And by God's grace, see you in 2026. And remember, I am not here to scare you. I am here to prepare you. Peace.